I want to pivot a little bit to Ukraine, because I did notice that mainstream media, at least Morning Joe, is now acknowledging that Ukraine is not winning this battle against Russia, which I think a lot of us in left independent media predicted that this was going to happen anyway. We knew that Ukraine was not going to be able to beat Russia, even with the billions of dollars of aid that came from the US government in reference to weapons, et cetera. We knew how powerful Russia's military is. Also, Russia has a neighbor next door to them called China, that if they need to knock on their door and say, come help us out, then we're looking at potential, World War III. But mainstream media is now admitting that Ukraine is not going to be able to win this. So the question that I have is, number one, why do you think they are now finally acknowledging that this isn't going to happen? And two, what do you think this means in reference to the possibility of a World War III? Where do you think the U.S. government will act next?
Well, with the Ukraine, what I'll say is this. Generally speaking, the American people are the most ignorant people in the world about the world they live in. We don't know anything about the world that's outside our borders. Well, we don't even know anything about our own borders. I mean, people who live in there are people who live in Albany all their lives. Their big adventure is going to New York City or going to Disneyland. That's it. They don't know anything about Mississippi. They don't know anything about Alabama, California. Ignorant about their country, and God forbid now we talk about the complexities of Canada or what's going on in Mexico. And then you move down to Latin America, South America, they're confused. They can't even point Ukraine on the map. And so these ignorant people, including, by the way, all the talking heads on TV, I've met them all. There was a time when I was actually invited to be on all those shows. Back when Bill Clinton was getting beat up and the Republicans thought that my message was cool, so I could be on Good Morning America. Me and Katie Couric were cutting the rug and all this kind of stuff. Dan Rather and I were having beer afterwards, and Tom Brokaw invited me to his Christmas parties. I mean, I was in, and but then suddenly I became inconvenient because the truth became inconvenient because suddenly a different president came in and different messaging, and boom, done. But I met them all. They're dumber than dirt. Truly are dumber than dirt. These are people that read what is put on the teleprompter in front of them, and they don't have any depth, none. Their producers own their brains. And I'm dead serious. And any of you big name people out there, all you talking heads, if you disagree with me, I challenge you right now to a debate, anytime, anywhere, drop of the hat. Let's do it. Let's hook and jab on stage in front of an audience and find out who is shallow and who's deep. They are dumber than dirt, just like the audience they talk to. And when it comes to an issue like Russia, we're gripped here in the United States with Russophobia. It's a fear of Russia, an unnatural fear of Russia. Ask people about Russia. They don't know anything about Russia, Sabrina. Nothing. They know nothing about Russia. And so suddenly they're told Vladimir Putin's this evil dude. And they go, yeah, he's evil. Why? Well, Tom Brokaw told me so. Or, so somebody told me he was evil, but they don't know who he is. They don't know where he came from. He was KGB. Really? Wow. That's a lot of knowledge there, guy. He's also a taxi driver in St. Petersburg. When he got out of the KGB in the decade of the 1990s, was one of the worst decades in Russian history, that millions of Russians lost their lives because of the policies that we imposed on those people. We empowered oligarchs who stole money from the pensioners, leaving them homeless in apartments that suddenly became valuable only after the pensioners were removed. So mafia gangs went around and murdered millions of pensioners to steal their apartments and sell them to make money for the oligarchs who then fed that money back to us. I bet most Americans don't know that. That's what created Vladimir Putin. He's a guy who came into power in 1999, New Year's Day, by New Year's Eve, and took a broken country. And since then, he's been trying to rebuild it and lead it out. And we resent this because we thought we had beaten the Soviet Union at the end of the Cold War. We thought we could keep Russia down. We had a compliant tool in there named Boris Yeltsin, who's willing to do anything we asked him to do, sell his country down the road. And suddenly a guy comes in named Vladimir Putin and says, I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm a Russian. I'm going to do what's good for Russia. Doesn't mean I'm anti-you, but I'm pro-me. And he started to do this, and we resented him. And this resentment led to us not trying to understand Russia. John F. Kennedy gave a speech at the American University in June of 1963. It's considered one of the best speeches he ever gave. But one of the things he talks about there is the need to not necessarily agree with Russia or the Soviet Union at that time on everything, but to understand their point of view, their perspective, that before we make a final decision, we have to put ourselves in their shoes and see the problem from their perspective. And once we do that, we might understand why they're doing what they're doing, and maybe we won't fear it as much. Maybe we can work together with them. I can guarantee you right now that if every American took the time to put themselves in the shoes of the Russians, go back to the 1990s and see what it's like to live there. Have your relatives commit suicide by alcoholism, just jump off a building, die of sclerosis, you name it, it happened. It was bad. Or if they were a pensioner, and when I say a pensioner in the 1990s, I'm talking about the people who saved the world in World War II. The Soviet Union lost 27 million people. They were the number one killer of Nazis out there. And that generation are the pensioners that we're talking about. The people that saved the world, stood up to Nazi Germany, saved the world, are being murdered by gangs for their apartments. You got to put yourself in their shoes and understand the miracle that's taken place in Russia. That was just there last May. I have to tell you, clean, well organized, the economy's working, and great people. Just like the Iraqis, the Russians are great people. They are welcoming, they're friendly, they're educated, they're cultured, they're everything that we claim they're not. But this Russophobia has allowed the media and the government to shape the minds of the Americans so that we accept anything at face value. We don't know why Russia went in. We're just told that Russia brutally invaded Ukraine. Nobody's told about the Maidan in 2014, the coup that was orchestrated by the CIA, the European Union, the United States, Victoria Nuland's role in that, Miss Neocon, handing out cookies to people as if she was just there to hand out cookies, not to promote the elevation of neo-Nazi parties. Remember, we talked about World War II, defeating the Nazis. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Google Stepan Bandera, why don't you? He is the national hero of Ukraine. They worship this dude. They name streets after him. They have statues for him. That guy slaughtered 30 to 40,000 Jews. He killed over 110,000 Poles, and he killed over 200,000 Russians because he is a white racist. It's not me saying that. It's the CIA saying that, MI6 saying that. The U.S. Congress acknowledges that the supporters of Bandera are white supremacists, neo-Nazi supporters, but they're the ones we put in power. And then we turned around, we expanded NATO after we said we weren't going to expand NATO. Remember the deal that was cut with Gorbachev in 1989, 1990, when Germany was to unify. Not 1 inch eastward, we promised, not 1 inch. And then we expanded. We lie through our teeth. Every time our lips move, it's a lie. And the Russians are looking at this going, what are you doing? You're expanding to our borders, and now you empower Stepan Bandera ideology in Ukraine. We can't accept this. We won't allow it to happen. There was a conflict because these Banderas declared ethnic war on the ethnic Russians, and they tried to commit genocide against them. Study what happened in Mariupol. Study what happened in Odessa, a city on the Black Sea, when the Banderas went down there in May, burning to death 48 Russians hundreds were jammed into a building. They set it on fire. And then as the people tried to come out, they shot them. They compelled the others to run back in the building and die of smoke inhalation and flames. And then the bodies were on the street. And these wonderful people whom we fund today go around and kick the bodies, spit on them to make sure they're dead. Good people, good democratic people. We empowered them. And the Russians said, hell no. And so the ethnic Russian people rose up and fought against them. It became a conflict from 2014 until 2015. Interestingly, in 2015, when the Russians intervened, they surrounded the Ukrainian army, and they had 25,000 of them surrounded. They were going to kill them all. Now, I know we're not supposed to enjoy death and destruction, but the Russians had them good. And suddenly France and Germany step in and say, don't kill those Ukrainians, please, Vladimir Putin, don't kill them. We can make peace. And he said, how? These guys are all about ethnic genocide against the Russian people. We can't allow this to happen. No, let them go. And we will have a peace accord called the Minsk Accords. And we guarantee we're going to make it work. And Putin said, okay, I believe in peace. And he let 25,000 Ukrainian soldiers go. And then from 2015 to 2022, NATO started training the Ukrainian army. NATO put out a slide that said, we train a battalion of Ukrainian troops to NATO standard every 55 days here in Western Ukraine. Then they drew an arrow to the east so they can kill Russians here. NATO's bragging about that. That's the mission. The whole mission was to buy time. It wasn't about peace. It was to buy time for the Ukrainians to build an army capable of defeating the Russians. And here's where you can criticize Putin. He actually believed the West when they said they wanted peace. And he kept pushing for peace, pushing for peace, pushing for peace until he's finally betrayed. And then what he said is, okay, I don't believe in Minsk. So what we need instead of Minsk is a new European security framework. He put forward 2 draft treaties in December of 2021, one to the US, one to NATO, and said, if you don't want a war in Ukraine, all we have to do is sit down and talk about this. Just talk about it. Take it seriously. We ignored it, pushed it off. And then we got surprised when he invaded. And when he invaded, people like me thought he's going to roll to Kiev and take it over because the Russian army, of course, was unstoppable. But that wasn't their purpose. Russia was never trying to take over Ukraine. The purpose of the initial military operation was to get the Ukrainians to the negotiating table to bring a rapid end to this war. And it almost worked. 3 sessions in Gomel, Belarus, 2 sessions in Turkey. The last session, the Ukrainians signed an agreement. You know what the agreement would have given them? All the territory that Russia occupied would be returned, except Crimea. Russia said, you ain't never getting that back because that's Russian. The Donbass, independent with a referendum. But everything else that Russia occupied would get. And what the Russians did as a proof of good faith is they voluntarily withdrew from Kiev and from northern Ukraine and said, there it is, confidence building measure. We withdrew. We promised to withdraw from every place. All you have to do is sign here and say, we won't join NATO. That's it. We won't join NATO. War's over. Boris Johnson flies in with the support of the CIA, the United States, and says, don't accept that deal. We can beat the Russians. We're going to give you all the money and equipment in the world. And the stupid Ukrainians went, we'll take that deal. Today, if they had taken that deal, 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers would be alive today. 10 to 20 million Ukrainians would have their homes. Millions of children would have a stable life, be going to school, getting the education that they need to be good citizens. Instead, an entire nation has been destroyed. Ukraine's lost 20% of its territory because Russia afterwards said, we can never allow you to govern territory where there's an ethnic majority population. And so Russia took Zaporizhia, took Kherson, took Donetsk, took Lugansk, had referendums and brought them in. They said, you're never getting that back. But Ukraine could have had all that territory had they just accepted peace. Russia is the only nation out there that's been trying to have a peaceful outcome to this war. But now Russia's at a point where they say, we can't negotiate with Zelensky. We can't trust him or the West anymore. We don't trust them. We're going to win on our terms. And they're winning. And they're winning decisively. And what's happened is all the lies that people were telling about Russia were being accepted at face value by a population who knows nothing about Russia. You can't lie anymore because it's so obvious what's happening right now. You can't spin it away. And so Ukraine has lost. All that money we poured in is gone. All those tanks we sent them, they're gone. All those men we trained, they're dead. And Ukraine has nothing left to replace them. So now you ask the question about World War III. Here's the thing. The United States said early on in this conflict that, and again, if you're a Ukrainian, guys, please go back to the co-check room and get your IQ because you checked it at the door when you came into this thing called the American-sponsored war. America doesn't care about Ukraine. Let's just be straight up about that. We never have. America has allowed you to sacrifice 400,000 of your men for nothing. We will never, ever, ever allow you to join NATO. You will never be a member of NATO. You won't be a member of the European Union. We don't like you. We're just using you. That's it. We thought that we could use you to create a war that generates instability in Russia to bring them down. The strategic defeat of Russia was our objective from day one. We wanted to replicate that Maidan revolution that took place in Kiev in 2014 in Moscow. We even call it the Moscow Maidan. We thought we could sanction Russia, collapse their economy, create military difficulties so that the Russian population rose up and removed Vladimir Putin from power. But even the Washington Post, even the Wall Street Journal today say that was fantasy. It was apparently never going to happen because Putin is stronger today than he has ever been. But the key thing is Russia said, because what's World War III? We're really talking nuclear war. It means the end of the world. It means that we start firing nukes against each other. We used to do arms control. That was my thing. I was a weapons inspector in the Soviet Union. I implemented the first nuclear disarmament treaty. I believe in disarmament. I believe that what we tried to build in the Cold War could have relevance to this day. But in order to do that, these are bilateral relations that have mutual reciprocity, which means that we have to trust one another. We have to trust one another. I mean, Ronald Reagan said, "Trust but verify." I was the verification guy. But still, there has to be a modicum of trust. The Russians don't trust us. We've lied to them across the board. So what the Russians have said is, we're done with arms control the way it's done. We don't want any treaties with you at all. None. Zero. We don't trust you. In order to have a treaty relationship, we have to trust you, and we can't trust you. You've lied to us from day one. And then what Russia did before they did, they told us, stop withdrawing from treaties. We withdrew, for instance, from the anti-ballistic missile treaty. That was a treaty signed in 1972 that was supposed to create a balance of power between Russia and the United States that was premised on the notion of mutually assured destruction, meaning that we're not going to build missile defenses because we accept the fact that if there's a war, if there's missile defense, people might be likely to fire nuclear weapons. We want both sides to be scared to death of firing nuclear weapons. So no missile defenses. It's called mutually assured destruction. I launch against you, you launch against me, we both die. So why don't we not launch? So we did that. The ABM treaty was a cornerstone of this. The Bush administration in 2002 withdrew from it because we thought Russia was weak. Remember, we had the decade of the 90s, keeping Yeltsin down. They were weak. We don't have to care about the Russians anymore. We're America. We can do anything we want. And we want to build missile defense because why not? And so we quit the treaty, and Putin said, don't do that. Don't do that. That's destabilizing. You're threatening us now because now you're going to build missile defenses, and you're going to be in a situation that you're going to ask us to continue to reduce our nuclear arsenals to the point where if there is an exchange, you could hit us first, kill half our missiles, and whatever we have left fires, and you shoot them down, and we got nothing. Nothing. This is destabilizing. Please don't do it. Then in 2018, Putin gave up and gave a speech, and he said, I asked you not to do it. So what we've done now is we built missiles that you can't shoot down. These are the most powerful missiles in the world. There's nothing you can do to defend yourself. Are you listening now? He actually said that. Are you listening now? And we're not. We continue to lie. I meet often with Anatoly Antonov. He's the Russian ambassador to the United States. The irony is, me as a private citizen, just having talks about disarmament, I've met more with the Russian ambassador in the last year than the State Department has. Tells you how bad things are. I've met more with the Russian defense attaché than the Pentagon has. The defense attaché is a former ballistic missile guy, meaning that if you want to talk about disarmament treaties and nuclear disarmament, he's the guy to talk to. Nobody's talking to him. Antonov negotiated the last remaining treaty, the New START treaty. He negotiated. He's the guy we should be talking to. Everybody's ignoring him. So finally, the Russians went, we don't want to have a relationship with you. And now here's the problem. They have all these new weapons, and they're really, really good. There's nothing we can do to defend against them. So what we're going to do is build our new weapons. But now there won't be a treaty in place to control this. And we're in danger of having this nuclear arms race break out. And once that happens, one mistake, one glitch in the system, one misidentification of radar, and it's over. Sabrina, it's over. It's over that quick. You won't even know it. You'll be sitting there, there'll be a flash, and you'll be dead. And that's what you need to hope for. You need to hope that you're in a place that's going to get hit with a thermonuclear warhead early on, because you want to die instantly. What you don't want to be is the person outside the immediate lethal range and die of a slow death of radiation poisoning or starvation or disease and have this long lingering death. But the bottom line is we're all going to die. No one will survive a thermonuclear exchange between the United States and Russia. And that's the direction we're heading right now. Now, neither side claims to want this. But, the United States, we're so accustomed to being the world's sole remaining superpower after the collapse of the Soviet Union. We are so arrogant. We are so full of ourselves that we can't, for a moment, do what John F. Kennedy asked us to do, put ourselves in the Russian shoes, to see the problem from the Russian perspective. I've done that. And I have to tell you, once you do that, excuse my language, but you realize how much America sucks as a nation. I mean, and we really do suck because we lie, and we don't care about living in harmony with anybody. It's only about us. We are the most selfish nation on the planet. And it disgusts me. It disgusts me. And I'm a proud American. Don't get me wrong. You come after my country, I'll be on the front line ready. I'm getting a little old, so I'll be hobbling on the front line, but I'll still be there. I'm not going to let anybody run roughshod over America. but I'll be damned if I'm going to support us running roughshod over other people. That's not what this is about. We're supposed to be the good nation. We're supposed to be the people that believe in human rights and individual liberties and freedoms. Our Constitution is supposed to have meaning. It stands for nothing. Not only do we violate the rights of American citizens on a daily basis, when I say we, the government we put in power, but we take these same standards. All men are created equal. We know that means all humans are created equal, all men and women. That's our Constitution. All men are created equal. We're all equal, but we're not. What does the American president say when he signs off? God bless America. What does that mean? I mean, I'm not overly religious, but I would imagine it means that the creator, the man who created the heavens and the earth, 6 days, seventh day he rested, that God, the big man, created the earth. And he only blesses Americans? I mean, God bless America. So God only comes down and touches America. The rest of the world, no, God damns them. You're all damned. It's criminal to think that way, but that's how we view it. American exceptionalism. Joe Biden just wrote a stupid op-ed in the Washington Post where he talks about America being the exceptional nation. We're not exceptional. The only thing we're exceptional about is being liars. We're exceptional liars. We're exceptional thieves. We steal everything from the world. We don't do anything honestly. The rules-based international order that we're seeking to impose is not about the rule of law. It's about the rule of might makes right. That America dictates outcome. That's it. That's wrong, ladies and gentlemen. That's wrong. And anyways, you're getting me a little, not you getting me, a little fired up here.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've been fortunate enough where I've had a lot of international students, and I've had some students from Russia and Ukraine, and they've echoed some of the same sentiments that you've added. Actually, I had one Ukrainian student that told me that they actually had never met an African-American person until they came to the U.S. And then when we go into the Ukraine war, and I learned about the Nazification in Ukraine, I learned about the letter that was signed by people like Rokana, where they said in 2018 that they were deeply concerned about the Nazification, not just in Ukraine, but also in Poland, which all of a sudden they seem to forget about that letter now. Yeah. It all started to make more sense. But one of the things that I've wondered, I noticed something that I didn't notice before. Ukraine is right next to Moldova. So then I started to think about something else when I hear people talking about Ukraine corruption, particularly Zelensky as well, using U.S. aid, using some of these dollars for things that are not a part of this conflict. And I honestly have to ask, I know that Moldova also has an issue with corruption. And funnily enough, I learned about that from 90 Day Fiance, where there was a cast member who was from Moldova, and he was telling his fiance that when you come to my country, you have to understand there's a lot of corruption that happens in Moldova. And I was once a part of that at some point in time. So there may be things that you hear, et cetera. I wonder if some of the corruption from Moldova in some way made its way to Ukraine. Do you know anything about that, or about the corruption that has been claimed about Zelensky, for example, about him using dollars for other purposes instead of the war?
Yeah, I mean, look, Moldova is a corrupt nation. Romania is a corrupt nation. That region had a lot of corruption, but Ukraine is corrupt on its own right. It's not as though Moldova was a diseased entity that infected Ukraine. It might be the other way around. Moldova might have had a chance, except it was living next door to Ukraine, which from its very inception has been the most corrupt place in the world from the very beginning. A lot of people talk about, there was an agreement. I think it was, it's either the Budapest or the Bucharest Agreement. It might be Budapest Agreement, but in 1994, where Ukraine agreed to give up its nuclear arms. This is the legend. They gave up their nuclear arms with the guarantee of security. And everybody's like, so Russia now has violated that, and Ukraine would have been better off having nuclear weapons because the West has abandoned it. And I always point out to people that Ukraine never had nuclear weapons. Never. There were Soviet weapons. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Russian Federation said, there are weapons, nuclear weapons. And Ukraine never had the ability to fire them. All the codes, the launch codes, the locking mechanisms were all controlled by the Russians. And the Russians made it clear to the Ukrainians, you make a move on the nukes, we kill you all. It isn't going to happen. So the Ukrainians never owned them. what they agreed to is that they would dispose of them, either return them to Russia or have international inspectors come in and remove them. And this was part of Ukraine's acknowledgement that in order to be part of the international community, they had to agree to join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means they forswore being a nuclear power. They agreed to this all up front. But then the Ukrainian governments run around, they go, how can we get more money? This is the honest to God's truth, Sabrina. How can we get more money? We're going to blackmail the world. We're going to say we ain't giving up these nukes until you pay us money. And so they sat there and it became a giant grift. And they sat there and it took more money from the West, more money from the West, more. And finally, Russia came in and said, we're tired of this game. Here's all the money you asked for. Let's get rid of the nukes. We're done. But it was a grift. Ukraine is a giant grift. There's not been an honest day of governance in Ukraine. The oligarchs in Ukraine are some of the most corrupt and some of the most violent. When I was a UN weapons inspector, I went to Kiev in 1997. We were going there to try and talk the Ukrainian government to stopping the work of this Ukrainian arms dealer who was basically taking apart the weapons factories that Ukraine had and selling the production equipment to Iraq, to Libya, to other nations. And we wanted to get them to intervene to stop. Oh man, it's not government like you think it is. It's government of what can you do for me? And I was an American, but I was a UN employee. The whole time I was there, whether it's from Kuchma, the president, on down to the intelligence service, every meeting was, hey, now we'll do this, but can you put in a good word for us to join NATO? Can you help us get into NATO? And I'm like, I'm a UN official. I can't help you get into NATO. I don't represent the United States of America. Yeah, but you're an American, right? You can do this, right? And I'm like, no, I really can't. But you're saying yes, right? No, I'm really saying no, I can't. I had to get out of there. I had to get out of there because it was so corrupt. I was told by someone that I'm really angering people because I'm not playing the game and that my life could be at risk. That's how corrupt this place is. It's a disgusting cesspool of corruption and criminality that occupies the highest levels of government and has occupied from day one. The oligarchs run the country. You know, Zelensky was an actor. He was in this show called Servant of the People. And it's a fascinating show because he played a common man who became president. He was a teacher and he became president. And then because of this show, the Ukrainian people thought he could be president because he played one on TV. So they elected him to be president. But when Servant of the People starts, it's basically showing this room with, I think, 4 or 5, faceless men who are running the country. And they're talking about the deals they're cutting, what they're going to do. That's how Ukraine's run. If you think it's about the parliament, the will of the people, nope, it's about the oligarchs getting together and divvying up power, and it's always been that way. Zelensky was brought in by an oligarch to do exactly what he's doing right now. He is not the representative of the people. He's not a servant of the people. He is the servant of the oligarchs, which means he's a servant of the powers that are using the oligarchs to pursue policies inside Ukraine. It's always been corrupt. It will never be a democracy as long as this system exists. The one good thing about this war is it will probably break that system. A Russian victory will probably result in the defeat of this corrupt entity that's known as Ukraine, and whatever emerges after that might have a chance of normalcy.